Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And now, here are your hosts, Scott and Jesse from CompassKnox.com.
Welcome back again to Compass Points, the weekly podcast where we talk about Knoxville government, politics, news, business, education, whatever gets our attention. I'm Jesse Mayshark, co-founder and co-publisher of Compass, which you can find at CompassKnox.com, which covers all of the above. Joined, as always, by Scott Barker, co-founder and co-publisher of Compass. How are you doing today, Scott?
I'm doing just fine, Jesse. We're doing this on Friday, and there's it's a little bit cooler than it has been. Yeah. Not much, but a little bit.
Yeah, you can tell that fall is somewhere on the horizon.
And for University of Tennessee football fans, fall has definitely arrived because it's Gator Hater weekend. Although the outcome of that game has by the time people listen to this will have already been decided.
Right.
But yes.
Is this our prediction portion? Let's go ahead and put some predictions out. Let's have a good time.
No, sir. Well, not from me. Maybe Scott has a prediction.
No, I don't make predictions. I just watch the games and enjoy them.
Especially if the Vols lose.
No, not necessarily.
Just one game a year, he really cares about them losing. Other than that, he's indifferent, I'm guessing.
Right. Florida and Tennessee for you, is that one of those a pox on both houses sort of thing?
Well, I don't want to. Boy, I tell you one thing. I really hate to speak publicly about football. But as an Alabama fan, I really hate speaking publicly about
I'll chip in on your
football.
half. Alabama LSU every year is the game to me that if the stadium just swallowed both teams, that'd be the only win I could see.
Well, yeah, that if that happened in the Swamp this weekend, or now last weekend, I guess that I wouldn't be too brokenhearted.
And it would be a sports story you would have to write if somehow magically the ground opened up and swallowed two football teams. I feel like that'd be a newsworthy event even for your non-sports paper that you guys do.
Yeah, probably so.
Okay. See, that's what we're talking about.
If it happened in Florida, though, it's not really local news, so we might mention it somewhere. All right. Well, we do have other non-football related topics to talk about this week. We're going to talk actually a little bit about the local economy. What is going on here? We had a reminder this week that we have an ongoing shortage of ambulance service in Knox County. A little bit alarming. County candidates are already starting to line up for the 2024 elections. I know we are still in the 2023 election cycle, the city of Knoxville, but no rest for the wicked or the weary or whatever that saying may be. We are going to talk about a fairly major development that is not happening in Choteau, West Knox County, and why it is not happening. And to start us off, we had an interesting and, frankly, a little bit confusing situation this week involving County Commissioner Kyle Ward and an ethics complaint filed against him by a citizen. So this is something that citizens can do, or anybody can file an ethics complaint about a county official. Knox County has a code of ethics that all employees and public officials in the county are subject to, that governs things like conflicts of interest and, the trading of votes for gifts or money and those kinds of things. All of that is restricted. So Kyle Ward, who represents the 4th District, West Knoxville, West Knox County. He is in the 3rd year of his first and what will be his only term, because he's already said he's not running for re-election next year. He owns a local waste removal company, which services some parts of unincorporated Knox County. And he also is a developer on the side, has various business interests. So what happened here is that in July, Ward came into the ownership of a couple of vacant lots in a subdivision in West Knox County. And these lots were transferred to him by developer Scott Davis via a quitclaim deed. Scott Davis, very well-known local developer, one of several major home builders in Knox County, and also very politically active, particularly in donating to Republicans at the local, state, and national levels. He is among a group of Knox County developers who are very active in local politics because they like to have people on our local bodies, on county commission, on city council, who are at least open to the kinds of things that developers want from local government, which is usually rezonings when they want them, or various kinds of builder-friendly regulations and so forth. So developers have long been a well-established interest group in local politics. Davis very much in the forefront, I would say, of a particular group of developers who especially work outside the city of Knoxville in the unincorporated areas. And Davis had owned many lots in this subdivision. It's the Harrison Springs subdivision off of Pellissippi Parkway near Hardin Valley, and had sold most of those lots in past years to developers who have built homes on them. And there's these 2 lots that are left in this subdivision that are not, on the face of it, if you go and look at the map, super attractive lots. They have a big steep drop-off at the back side, and they're kind of wedged into a back corner of the subdivision. If you look at the map and look at the topography, it's not hard to see why these are the 2 lots that have remained undeveloped in this subdivision. So in July, Davis filed a quitclaim deed, which is a legal mechanism that you can use to just basically transfer property to whoever you want to. And it was filed at a nominal fee of $10, which, Scott, I guess we should say this is not it might sound weird to people who don't know of it, but it's not really that unusual a mechanism.
No, it's not. Quitclaim deeds, one way to look at them is it's kind of an as-is transaction, that they have a nominal fee on there of $10. It's the only amount that's on there. A lot of people get confused. They think that that's the amount that someone pays for the property. It has nothing whatsoever to do with that. Quitclaim deeds are often used to transfer property with no exchange of money. For instance, between family members, or if there's a divorce, one party will quitclaim their interest in the home, the family home, to the other as part of the divorce settlement. Things like that. And quitclaim deeds are risky, basically, for the person receiving the property, because there's no title search, there's no guarantee that there's not some lien against it. There's all kinds of things. That's why it's usually done between people who know each other, and they're also used to clear up title language and things like that. So it's not. It's not unusual for quitclaim deeds to be used in transfers at all, and the complainant here cited the $10 figure as a thing. Well, he transferred the property for $10. That's not the case. I mean, that $10 is on just about every quitclaim deed. Sometimes it's just $1 is put in at this. You've got to put an amount in this line on a quitclaim deed, and that's the number that people usually use.
Right. And it can mean that that's all the person's paying or that they're not paying anything, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. And one way that they are used by developers is the property will be transferred to somebody who is planning to develop it, and then they will have a separate contract with the seller. So in this case, it's Davis transferring the property to Ward, and the contract will say that the buyer will develop the property and then sell it, and then pay the seller the sales price of the land.
Right.
And that is apparently what has happened here. But of course, that is not visible. If you're just going and looking at like the KGIS website or doing property searches, all you're going to see is that quitclaim deed and that $10. So there's a group of neighbors in this subdivision that does not want these lots developed. And Kyle Ward came to the county's Board of Zoning Appeals in August seeking a variance on the lots because they're so steep, basically asking to be able to build closer to the front lot line. I think the code mandates 22 feet setback. He wanted a 15-foot setback, so be 7 feet closer to the street than is allowed under the code. That's the variance he was seeking. And a group of neighbors came and opposed that and basically just kind of argued that these lots are not really very developable. I mean, they don't like the idea of them being built on. The same day, and the Board of Zoning Appeals deferred action on that. They talked about it and said they wanted to learn more or come back this month and look at it. So they didn't do anything on it in August. But the same day as that BZA hearing in August, one of the neighbors went and filed an ethics complaint against Ward, basically saying he's a county commissioner and he's been given these 2 lots by a well-known politically connected developer for $10, and this is an ethical violation. So as soon as the complaint was filed, we talked to Ward about it, and Ward said, like, that's not true. I have an agreement with Davis to actually purchase the properties after they've been developed. And there was a hearing this past week of the Knox County Ethics Committee, a special called hearing just to hear this complaint. And at that hearing, County Law Director David Book brought with him, which he had been given by Davis and Ward, a copy of a contract between Davis and Ward that it says was signed the same day as the quitclaim deed back in July, wherein Ward agrees to pay Davis $40,000 apiece for each of the 2 lots after they've been developed and sold. He would pay him out of that money. And that is a legal contract. Now, that contract was not filed with the Register of Deeds until this past Tuesday, the day before the Ethics Committee hearing. And that bothered some people on the Ethics Committee. They said that, there wasn't a contract until there was a complaint about it. How do we know that this contract was really signed in July? It hadn't been filed. There were some other people on the Ethics Committee with real estate and development experience, a realtor and also an attorney who'd worked in development. And they said, well, no, this is actually pretty common because, and this gets technical, but typically you wouldn't file that contract until after the construction loan is, the point of the quitclaim deed is to allow the new owner clear title, so then they can go to the bank and get a construction loan to do the development on the property. After that construction loan then becomes sort of like the first interest in the property, the first person who will need to get paid at the end of it all after the property is sold. Then the contract with the seller, in this case Davis, gets filed as basically a second deed of trust behind the construction loan, and then he gets paid. And then Ward, the developer, Ward in this case, would get whatever's left over after he pays off the construction loan, after he pays for the property, then whatever else he's sold the property for, he gets to keep that money. And so there were people on the Ethics Committee who said, like, this is, yes, it sounds confusing, but this is actually normal. This is how these things go. But there were enough questions among people on the Ethics Committee to say, well, we'd like to know more about this. Now, Book, the law director, in quite strong language, both in, he had written memos and sent them to the ethics committee, and then he also reemphasized it several times during Wednesday's meeting. His belief is that this complaint doesn't even actually make any allegations of violations of the county ethics code. Basically, the county ethics code says that, you're not allowed to receive gifts or payments in exchange for votes or any other kind of action, in the person's favor. And also that you can't receive gifts from people whose activities and operations are regulated by the county. It doesn't spell out who all those people are, but a developer like Davis would probably fall under that. He's regulated by the county enough that he shows up at county commission a fair amount looking for rezonings and other things. So he would probably qualify. But Book said that the contract shows that this isn't a gift. These properties are currently appraised at a combined like $92,500. That contract would call for Ward to pay $80,000, but of course appraisals are approximate. The appraisal by itself does not tell you how much you have to sell a piece of property for. If you're paying $40,000 a piece for two pieces of property, Book said that's not a gift. That's just a real estate transaction. And even though Ward is a commissioner and Davis is a developer who often comes to county commission, Ward is allowed to buy property from him in the same way that a county commissioner who sits on the county beer board is allowed to go have a drink at a bar that they regulate.
To use that, I was going to use this anyway. Was that Randy Burleson is very politically active as well, and there's nothing wrong with political figures going to Aubrey's to eat, his restaurant,
or even holding an event,
or holding
an
an event
Aubrey's,
at
right.
an Aubrey's. So I mean, it's if you take it so far that you can't do any business whatsoever with anybody who remotely is affected by government, you can't do anything at all. You might as well. You can't drive. You can't get gas because the people who own gas stations here and convenience stores donate money to political causes. I mean, that's just the way it is.
And there has to be, under the conflict of interest rules, there has to be like a specific conflict, a specific violation. It can't just be that, well, you're a commissioner and he's a developer and therefore it's bad. There was also an addendum to the complaint filed by the same neighbor alleging, because, again, Ward had been at the Board of Zoning Appeals the month before, alleging a conflict between Ward and one of the Board of Zoning Appeals members, Garrett Holt, saying that Holt shouldn't be allowed to vote on it because he was appointed to the Board of Zoning Appeals. He was nominated to it by Ward last year. And also that Holt is running for the seat that Ward currently occupies in next year's races, and we're going to talk about next year's races in a minute. Holt is a candidate for the county commission 4th seat, and Ward has actually given a campaign contribution to Holt's campaign. Holt's running as a Republican, Ward is a Republican, and that relationship created a conflict that meant that Holt should recuse himself from voting on something involving Ward at the BZA. But Book also dismissed that and said that under the Code of Ethics, campaign contributions are explicitly not counted as payments or gifts or any such thing. They're counted as constitutionally protected political activity. County commissioners are allowed to make donations to campaigns just like any other citizen, and campaign contributions are not counted as a conflict of interest, basically. The issue that Ward appointed or Ward nominated Garrett Holt to the Board of Zoning Appeals, the BZA has 9 members representing the 9 districts in Knox County. All 9 of them were nominated by the sitting commissioner. That's how you get on the BZA.
Yeah.
You're nominated by the district commissioner to represent that district. So if you say that like no county commissioner can that would mean that any county commissioner coming to the BZA would somehow automatically have a conflict because they probably nominated somebody who's on that body. But Book said like none of those things actually count as conflicts, and all of that together, he said, means that like this complaint does not even actually allege an ethical violation, that there's nothing in the complaint that even if it were proved true would constitute a violation. So the ethics committee was not fully satisfied with this. There were enough members who were kind of like, I don't really understand this whole quitclaim thing. One of the committee members, Virginia Anagnos, said, it looks fishy, it smells fishy. And, Book's response to that was, you might not like the optics, but that's not an ethics violation just because you don't like the optics of it. So what they did was they didn't do anything. They're going to take it back up their next regular meeting in November. And they're giving the complainant time between now and then to file any other information or make any other specific allegations he wants to about actual ethical violations. So we'll see what happens there. Ward, of course, maybe predictably, was totally dismissive of it, and he said, this is frivolous. This is just because these people don't want me to build a house there. Like, this never would have come up, except these neighbors are mad about that. But the property is, in fact, zoned residential. You can build a house on the property under its current zoning. We'll see. Ward is also in conversation with some of the neighbors there, he said, who might just want to buy the property from him in order to stop it from being developed. Which interestingly is
we'll
a maneuver that's going to come up again later in just a minute. So we'll see what happens with all of it. Like, by the time that November meeting comes, Ward might not even own the property. Like, who knows what's going to happen. But it was just an interesting chance to revisit the county ethics code and consider what does and does not constitute an ethical violation. And as Book said, it is a reminder that people who serve, especially on our local bodies, which are part-time, county commission, city council are considered part-time positions. They're also citizens of the community. They're allowed to have businesses. They're allowed to transact regular business as long as they don't cross sort of very specific ethical lines. So it was an interesting conversation.
Yeah, the idea of the understanding of what does and doesn't violate the ethics code is really key to formal things. I mean, obviously, you can, people can take a look at this, and if they, see that, they think that Holt, for example, is, not, if it looks bad for him, I don't know that it does, but if you think that, you can vote that way, but as far as being an ethical violation, that's a completely different thing. I mean, that's, there are specific things. I mean, you really, the person in office or in the position has to truly benefit directly from whatever it is they're voting on, for it even to matter.
And they don't have to be big things. We just had a few years ago the case where County Mayor Glenn Jacobs, former chief of staff, got fired over an ethical violation that basically involved him keeping a county golf cart at his house for his personal use. Yeah. The golf cart was only worth a couple $1,000s, not a huge deal, but it was an ethical violation.
Ethical violation,
using public property for private use. And
to get to that, the point that you made, if this property had not been zoned residential, they enter into this deal, and then it comes, Scott Davis tries to get it rezoned when this contract already exists, and they go to county commission to get it rezoned, and Ward doesn't recuse himself.
Right.
Then you can say, but those are ifs, and
right. That
would what the people say about ifs. I mean, you can make up all kinds of stuff. That's not the case here. I mean, it was, there's nothing that Davis is asking of Ward for this particular piece of property in Ward's official capacity.
Right. There's no, and again, that comes back to what Book said about the complaint itself. There's no alleged benefit to Davis here from that he's getting something.
In fact, Davis, is the thing that Davis is getting from it is he's getting rid of 2 lots that he hadn't been able to sell before. Yeah. I mean, when you look at that tract of property, when he sold all of the other lots to a home builder here, a home building company, sold all of them except these 2. Now, there's probably a reason why that home builder did not buy those 2 lots 5 or 6 years ago, whenever the sale was, I believe it was 2017. There's a reason, and the reason looks to me like it's because there is no backyard. These things just basically drop into a ravine,
right?
And basically Davis is getting rid of a couple of pieces of property that he otherwise was not going to be able to get rid of, and Ward is actually paying money for it. So apparently, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see if anything else bubbles out of there. All right, let's talk about Chodo. What was going to be Chodo Landing, R.I.P. Scott, walk us through the Chodo saga.
Okay, this was going to be a big deal, and it actually turned into a big deal too. But there is about a 12-acre piece of property. It used to be the Loy Farm in Chodo, which is basically south of Farragut in the southwestern corner of Knox County. Used to be all farmland. Now it's basically not filled. The northern part of it especially is filled with upscale subdivisions. The area along the Tennessee River is filled with really upscale lake homes. It's one of the wealthiest corners of the county. But there's this 12-acre piece of farmland there that the people had sold it, and Dominion Group, they're a local developer. They're doing the apartments that they're at Suttree Landing and on the south waterfront, for example, and they got an option on the property, and they were going to build 56 townhouse units of affordable housing, which, as anyone who's been paying attention knows, is one of the problems right now with the housing market in Knox County. Well, it's very expensive to live in Knox County now. That buy or rent property anywhere, and the lack of affordable housing has been cited. It's one of it's the biggest issue in the city election, and will probably be a big one in the county election next year too. But these would be townhouses. They would be for low to mid income residents. They would the upper limit, for example, for the residents, if you were a family of 4, the income limit was almost $70,000, more than $69,000. So basically, a teacher with a spouse that doesn't work and 2 kids would qualify to live there, or a couple that both of them combined make $65,000 a year. They could live there. They would qualify.
Right, and that is over the median.
And that's over the median. Yeah, the
right?
median household income's around $62,000. So we're not talking. It's not a public housing project where you have to have very low income to live. This is, these are people who, they could be teachers, could be sheriff's deputies. If there's only one income, primarily, people who work in Turkey Creek, people who work in Farragut, people who work at a number of locations out there in Southwest Knox County could live closer to where they work if they live there.
Right, because there is particularly not very much affordable housing anywhere around Concord, Chodo, Farragut.
No, the zip code, the 37922 zip code out there, the median price of a house is about $630, or sales price is about $635,000. And now that includes Farragut, not just Chodo. Chodo's probably higher in and of itself. The poor areas of Farragut have
right.
kind of bring down that median, but the incomes and the incomes out there are twice or not quite twice, but pretty much twice the county median. The home values, the median home value right now in Knox County is about $350,000. So this is close to double. The median price of a house out there is double what Knox County as a whole is. So anyway, it is a very wealthy I won't say enclave because it's not fenced off or anything, but it's a wealthy corner of the county. The residents there objected vigorously to this. They had several complaints. A couple of them were kind of your standard complaints. Traffic, and they've got a point. I mean, North Shore Drive does get backed up a lot right through there, through that area around the intersection with Chodo where there's a roundabout. And flooding, those are common. Almost every development that comes to the Planning Commission that's in the county, those are the two issues that people have. They're very rarely successful in fighting on those issues. What usually happens is the developer will agree to help pay for road improvements, to help with traffic. That's what happened at Belltown, that big one in North Knox County, that's under construction now. In this instance, they were gonna help pay for a turn lane at the entrance to this development. The other thing is flooding. To get approved for a subdivision in Knox County, you've got to have a stormwater plan anyway. And so the stormwater engineers that the developer hires comes up with a stormwater plan that the county has to approve. As long as they do that, then that takes care of it may or may not take care of the flooding issue, but it takes care of it technically to get approval. So those things we're going to go through. What the real issue was, and several of many of the people who commented to the Planning Commission, was over 300 comments that went to Planning Commission alone. They didn't want people at that income level living there.
Right.
I mean, that's the bottom line. Some were
right, and some of it was couched in language like, well, they're probably not going to be able to afford to have cars, and there's no public transit out here, so it won't be good for them.
Yeah, and which was funny. Didn't bring this out in the article, but several people brought it up and said, well, on the one hand, people out there are saying that they won't have cars, and there's no transit, and there are no sidewalks, and there are no businesses out there for them to go to. And then on the other hand, they're saying that it's going to bring in lots of more traffic. Well, which is it? Are they going to bring in traffic, or do they need public transit? Because it can't be both. And they got a point. I mean, the people that would live out there, this is not. I mean, nobody would be forced to live there. People would be choosing to live there based on given their means, and you wouldn't move out there if you didn't have a car. So the traffic issue would be up there, but the real issue was they did not want low to mid income people moving out there. Many of them mentioned property value. The literature on that is mixed on the impact of affordable housing communities in more affluent areas. Some say that it does harm those property values. Some say it doesn't. Those property, nothing has harmed the property values out there recently. So I don't know, but anyway, the opposition they created websites, circulated petitions. They called public officials. They submitted those comments to the Planning Commission.
They called public officials names too.
yeah, it was pretty vicious. I mean, some of the comments were pretty vicious. Not all of the comments were, but a lot of them were. Somebody out there, kind of a group that called itself Neighbors of Knoxville, hired a kind of controversial PR person out of Arizona to represent them. She is she had some notoriety herself. She was she took a video of herself trashing a COVID mask display at a Target store in Arizona and posted it online. And it went viral then. And since then, she has said that she was basically under the influence of the QAnon conspiracy theories, which are just absolutely nutty. And that's an objective assessment too, by the way. So she was in the throes of QAnon. In fact, she says now her husband staged an intervention, and so now she says that QAnon was a cult, and she was that she's behind it now. But she actually uses that to promote her firm, which she
and she is still pretty far right politically. I mean, her PR firm is called America First PR. Right?
Yeah, it's America First PR, and it kind of touts itself as the nation's #1 anti-woke PR firm. So
how exactly? And her name's Melissa Rain Lively, right?
Yeah.
How exactly she got dragged into this is unclear because we don't actually know exactly who paid her or how much or anything. But suddenly, we and other media in town were getting all these press releases from Arizona.
Yeah, she's not very. I don't know how big of a group that is. They're the only group that put out any kind of statements or anything, and but she certainly did not help the press get a hold of anyone who was.
You didn't find her very useful from a PR
standpoint. She was absolutely useless, other than sending out press releases. I will say that.
So I have a question, fellas. Do you think this is now a model for other communities to push back against growth? Will this potentially have a chilling effect of the, this middle income housing we talk about and this lower income housing that has been talked about forever in other parts of the county or the city? Is this a new way for the NIMBYs, which is my new favorite word, because it seems like this is a normal one. I mean, like you said earlier, it's like, traffic and floodwater. It's always the complaint every time they go up there. And so the new model isn't really go after whether it's zoning appropriate or not. The new model is just to make enough of a fuss and bring in some crazy person from Arizona to make sure they don't build that thing.
Interesting you should mention that, because yes, we cover that in the story as well, that we did last week. First of all, let's get to what happened. Dominion Group, in the face of all of this, just decided they were getting ready to go to the Planning Commission, where they were pretty much guaranteed approval. The land had been it was zoned correctly. They were taking their development plan to them. It was zoned correctly. It's in accord with the sector plan. It even had a couple of years ago, Scott Davis, the aforementioned developer, had an option on it, and I don't know if he actually had an option on it, but he was going to develop the property virtually identical, except it was market rate and not for low to middle income residents. It would have been market rate, and it passed Planning Commission unanimously with very little. There was a little bit of community opposition about roads and all, but the big difference is this. It was market rate and not an affordable development. So anyway, in the face of all this, Dominion Group just withdrew its request. So basically, if you were two kids on the playground, there was a staring competition, then they blinked. They were the one. They decided that. I don't know if it's they didn't explain it in their press release. They wouldn't answer any questions beyond their statement in the press release. So it's hard to say. I think that it's pretty fair to say that the specter of litigation, which the opponents threatened and certainly had the means to pay for, could have tied it up for a couple of years, and they didn't want to go through all that hassle. I don't know what the exact reasons were, but they pulled the plug on it. And to your question, Seth, yes, that's one thing that affordable housing proponents are concerned about is that this would be used as a blueprint. I talked to Mary Groh, who's on the board of Justice Knox, who actually lives near Concord Park, which is the eastern end of Choteau. Justice Knox is a faith-based social justice advocacy group. They are very involved in affordable housing, particularly inside the city, but also elsewhere in Knox County. And she's very concerned about that. She said that she told me that that they're going to have to redouble their efforts to get people to understand how serious the issue is, and that we need housing and affordable housing. So Dominion Group says it's going to look elsewhere. So the NIMBY, the Not in My Backyard movement in Choteau was triumphant.
Yep.
In this one, and succeeded in killing this affordable housing effort in their community. And I don't know if the strategy would work for every community, but I think that people would look at that and go, well, we'll try it.
Well, and it seems to me that their strategy, their approach was not unusual in the sense that we often see neighborhood associations opposing various kinds of planned developments and so forth, especially any that have density and especially any that have affordable housing components in them. And so, we have the NIMBY stereotype for a reason. It is sort of a long-standing thing that you see. But the difference here seemed to be one of scale and resources, and the community that surrounds it has so many resources. There were people within that community who went and spent, we don't know how much, but a significant amount of money to fight this, to get organized and do all of this. And, frankly, a lot of them are the kinds of people who are used to getting their way on
these are business owners and executives who are used to getting their way,
and they're used to public officials listening to them.
Well, there are a couple of things. They're very wealthy compared to the rest of the county. Some of them are very wealthy compared to anyone anywhere, and they vote. And so, they contribute to campaigns. We talked about that, and they vote, and they know how to make themselves heard, obviously. And so, one of the things that was interesting in this is, of course, what would happen down the road. Planning Commission was pretty much a slam dunk, and that. Several of the commissioners did not speak for. It didn't really talk to me about the exact. Well, they basically told me how they would probably voted or how they thought their colleagues would vote. They didn't say it on the record because they weren't going to have to consider it anymore. So they weren't. But it would have passed because there was no reason for it not to pass, and that's kind of what they have to do. If you go to the Planning Commission and you've got a plan and it fits. It checks all of the boxes for land use, they pretty much have to approve it. It would have gotten interesting later on because in order to finance affordable housing, developers have to put together these real complex financing deals, and that's because it doesn't cost any less to build an affordable housing project than a market rate one. It wouldn't have cost Dominion Group any less to build their unit or their development than it would have cost Scott Davis to do the exact same development on the exact same piece of property a couple of years earlier. The difference is that in order to accept the lower rents, you've got to reduce your the expenses long term, and that means not borrow as much money. In order to not borrow as much money, you get incentives, low income housing tax credits, federal housing funds. They were going to ask for a payment in lieu of tax agreement. All of those things that would have to go through the county for approval, and then it would have gotten interesting. One of the interesting things on this was that in order they'd already applied for the low income housing tax credits. Mayor Glenn Jacobs wrote a glowing letter in support of the application for those low income tax credits for the development. I called the mayor's office, and they said, well, that was just a perfunctory letter because of the
basically we do these for
everybody. We don't want we didn't want to be sued, and the mayor really hasn't taken a position one way or another on this particular development. Well, he actually did, because he wrote a letter in support of it, but the thing is that it would have been interesting because of the federal Fair Housing Act. It's very difficult to turn down housing, affordable housing programs because of the Fair Housing Act, for a good reason. And one of the things that they put in the Justice Department and Housing and Urban Development put out guidelines for local governments on land use for these projects, basically saying, you can't use the euphemism low income housing to discriminate against African Americans or any other protected class. And at least one one planning commissioner thought that that's exactly what they were doing. And but it would have been very difficult for the county commissioners and others, where you've got these politically active people who are ready to sue you if you approve it, and you've got others who have the developer, for one, who could be willing to sue you because you don't approve it. So I mean, there were going to be lawsuits either way on this one. So
yeah, and I know you reached out to a couple of county commissioners that didn't hear back. And I did hear back from one who said, I'm just not going to talk about it. Yeah,
and there were a lot of people I talked to who declined to talk on the record about it, and the general you don't want to talk about it because they didn't talk on the record, but let's just say that there wasn't a lot of support for the Choteau, the area, the residents in the area. A lot of people were in favor of the development.
Yeah, but of course, now that they've been spared, and they've been spared having to take a political or a public political position on it, and so they're not going to just step out and do it for fun.
No.
The other thing, obviously, that has circled around all of this, one of the opposition groups, the one that had the ChoteauLanding.com website, in announcing the result, said, well, and there's an agreement by another buyer to buy the property. Yeah. And so we've heard a lot of rumors about that and who that buyer might be, and that could be one of the local residents there who's just basically trying to take it off the market. Nobody has confirmed any of that yet. So of course we will watch to see for any subsequent paperwork that gets filed on the ownership of that property.
Yeah. I reached out to Dominion Group. As I said before, they didn't comment beyond their statement that they issued. The property is actually owned by a developer and home builder in Fountain City. The LLC they use is Wilco. They are the actual owners of the property. Dominion Group had an option to buy the property from them, and I called out there to see what they were going to do with the property, since they're the actual owners, and didn't get a call back. So
yeah. Well, so the net result of all of this is no affordable housing in Choteau, which is the way Choteau likes it.
Apparently so.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the upcoming county elections. As I mentioned, of course, we are still in the city of Knoxville election for city council seats and the municipal judge position, but people are lining up for next year's county races, and there's a good reason for them to get involved early, because in non-presidential years, the county, the primary for county offices, which is, everything from county mayor to county commission, school board, and so forth, is held in May. But in presidential election years, the county primary is held to line up with the presidential primary so that we don't have to have twice as many elections. And that comes in March. And so the presidential primary, we are a Super Tuesday state, and that is going to be March 5th this coming year. And if you think about that timeline, so candidates cannot even pick up nominating petitions until next month in October. They have to turn them in by December. And then, of course, we're in the middle of the holidays, and I'm sure people will be doing some campaigning. But really, you come out of New Year's, and you basically only have 2 months to campaign before the primary. Early voting actually starts in February. So, of course, people are getting ready. What we have on the ballot this coming year, we do not have all of those top-line county offices, the mayor, the sheriff, the fee offices. Those were all in the last cycle in 2022. But in 24, we have 7 county commission district seats and 4 school board seats, along with a couple of offices, the law director and the property assessor. And so, just to run through these real quick, looking at those county commission seats, the first district, represented by Daisha Lundy, is kind of the Center City district, and it is the most Democratic district. And Lundy is one of 2 Democrats on commission right now. She's in her first term, and she told me she hasn't decided yet whether to seek a second term. And so obviously she'll have to make that decision in the next little while here. If she does decide to run, maybe somebody will run against her, but she would probably be perceived as a fairly strong incumbent candidate. If she doesn't run, I think there would be a lot of interest there. Again, not least because it's one of the few county government seats that Democrats have a good chance of winning. And so there would probably be a lot of people interested there, but we'll just have to wait and see. The second district is the other district currently represented by a Democrat. That is Courtney Durrett, who was the recent former commission chair. She is also finishing her first term, and she said she is planning to seek re-election. Nobody else so far has declared. You would think there would probably be a Republican candidate there, but we'll wait and see. The fourth district, we mentioned that earlier. That's the one that Kyle Ward currently holds. He's not running for re-election. Garrett Holt, who we also mentioned, the one who's on the BZA, he is running as a Republican for that seat. And then there's a Democrat, Keith Britt, also running for that seat. People who go to a lot of public meetings like we do will know Keith well, because Keith is a very engaged local citizen who comes to county commission meetings, school board meetings. I don't know if he comes to city council meetings, because I don't go to city council.
Some city council meetings.
But he often speaks at public forum, and is just a generally active and informed guy. So he is running for the Democratic nomination there. The 5th district seat represents the area we were just talking about, Farragut, Choteau, Concord. Currently represented by John Schoonmaker. He is term limited, so he can't run. There is not currently a declared candidate there. There was one potential candidate who had named a treasurer, but then I confirmed with him that he is not seeking the seat. And so there's a little bit of rumor out there about who may or may not run there. That's a very Republican seat. So certainly there will be a Republican candidate there, maybe a couple, and maybe a Democrat as well. We'll see.
Maybe someone will hire Melissa Rain Lively to be their
campaign communications person. Yeah. Well, I mean, she knows the area, obviously.
Apparently so.
Or was able to Google it.
Yeah. I don't know. So.
The 6th district, right next door, is the northwest corner of the county. That's Hardin Valley up through Carnes. That is represented by current commission chair, Terry Hill, and she is seeking re-election there, would probably be a pretty strong candidate. However, and nobody else has yet named a treasurer or taken out well, you can't take out petitions yet, but Julie McBee Fritz, who has been a long-time active citizen in Karns, involved with many citizen groups, often comes to, for example, oppose various kinds of proposed developments in and around Karns. She announced at a public event earlier this month that she is planning to seek that seat. So if she does, that I believe she would be running as a Republican, and so that would be a primary challenge for Hill. Could be an interesting race because, again, she is a pretty well-known name out there. On the other hand, Terry Hill has won a lot of elections out there. She represented the school board there before she was elected to county commission in the same district. And, of course, she is the current commission chair. The 8th district, East Knox County, represented by Richie Beeler. Richie's actually going to, he'll have served 6 years by the time this term is up. He would be eligible to run for another term because in the county, unlike the city, partial terms don't count toward term limits. However, he has said he is not seeking re-election there, and that is generally supposed to be because he is probably planning to run for county clerk. He currently works for the county clerk's office as chief deputy, and I think we will probably see a Richie Beeler for clerk campaign. So he's not running for commission. DJ Corcoran, who is well known to those of us in the media because for a long time he was the Knoxville Fire Department's public affairs officer. And I've worked with DJ actually pretty closely when I worked at the city of Knoxville. He is running as a Republican for the 8th District. Again, a very Republican district there. And DJ is pretty well connected politically.
Yeah, very much so.
So he looks like a very strong candidate out there, and he has already started attending all of the county commission meetings, and he's kind of showing up at all the public events. He's been running a very active campaign for months. It's possible that either a Republican or a Democrat will emerge to challenge him, but he certainly looks like a strong candidate at the front end. And then we have the 9th District, which is South Knox County, kind of curving around to part of East Knox County. And that is currently represented by Carson Daly, a Republican. He is term limited, so obviously he can't run again. There are actually 3 candidates who have announced or at least, named treasurers in that district. One Democrat, Matthew Park, who ran a few years ago, ran a pretty good campaign, finished a close second in the Democratic primary for the State House District 15 seat, currently held by Sam McKenzie. So Park is running as a Democrat there. And then 2 Republicans, Barry Neal, who is a longtime University of Tennessee conference planner, is running as a Republican and has been endorsed by Carson Daly. And so he's the guy who Daly wants to succeed him. But attorney Andy Fox, who is kind of a conservative firebrand, I guess you could say.
I think you would approve of that description.
Very active, particularly on gun rights issues. He is a major legal proponent of an expansive reading of the Second Amendment. He was also very active in the anti-mandate movement during the pandemic against mask mandates and the other kinds of restrictions that were put in place. And so he has also named a treasurer, and so that could be an interesting contest in the Republican primary between somebody maybe a little more establishment in the case of Neal, who's been endorsed by the current commissioner, and then somebody representing a little bit more the the Trumpy wing, or I'm not sure, the anti-mandate wing of the Republican Party there in South Knox County. School board has 4 seats up. And the interesting thing with school board is there are no term limits on for school board, and so any incumbent technically could seek re-election no matter how many terms they've served. But out of those 4 districts, only one of those district incumbents has said for sure that he's going to run. That's Daniel Watson in the 3rd district, which is kind of a slice of northwest Knox County. It's partly in the city, partly outside the city, really a kind of politically mixed district. Watson ran 4 years ago before school board races were partisan, and so he didn't have to declare a party allegiance. And he said he is going to run for re-election, and he's still not going to declare a party allegiance. He's going to run as an independent. So this could be an interesting test. Ever since those races, the school board races became partisan 2 years ago, there's been discussion about, well, could somebody still mount a solid independent campaign and be successful for school board? Watson is going to try. There's no declared Democrat interested in the seat right now, but there is an interesting Republican, Angela Goddard, who also comes out of that anti-mandate movement we were just talking about with Andy Fox. She was very, 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 very active in fighting against mass mandates in schools. She actually formed the group, I forget, Unmasked Knox County Students. I forget exactly what the name of it was, but they were the group that hired an outside attorney to try to fight the mask mandate that the federal judge put in place in Knox County schools. And she has also identified herself online before as the local chair of Moms for Liberty, the conservative activist group that has been active in school board races around the country. So that's going to be an interesting race, even if nobody else gets in. But other people could, of course, still get in it. The 5th district seat, currently held by Susan Horn. Again, that's Farragut, Concord, and Choteau. She has served 2 terms and said she is not going to run again. There is a Republican, Lauren Morgan, who's very active in parent-teacher organizations in Farragut. She's already out there very actively campaigning. She is the only person who has publicly signaled an interest in running for that seat, so we'll see if anybody else bubbles there. And then the 8th district in East Knox County, currently represented by Mike McMillan. McMillan has not said whether or not he's seeking re-election, but there is a general supposition that he's not going to. He's the longest serving member of the school board. He's been on it since 2010, and he has had health issues in recent years. And I think there would be more surprise if he does run for another term than if he doesn't. And one sign of that is that there is already a Republican candidate declared in the 8th district. Tommy Lakins, a local information technology specialist, is running as a Republican. And again, that East Knox County area is very Republican. So we will see if any other candidates come through there. But those are the people looking at those seats. David Book, the county law director, has named a treasurer to run for re-election next year. There was some thought that he might retire. He's in his 70s, but maybe he's enjoying himself.
I guess so.
So it looks like he is going to be seeking re-election. And then the current property assessor is John Whitehead. He is term limited. Phil Ballard, who is a former property assessor, he served 2 terms before Whitehead. Well, actually, Whitehead and Ballard are the only 2 property assessors we've had this century. Yeah. They've been trading that seat back and forth since 2000.
Tennessee governors used to be.
Right, exactly. It was Whitehead, then it was Ballard, now it's been Whitehead. Ballard is running again, but he is going to face a pretty strong race from Jackie Raley, who is currently the chief deputy to Whitehead and is being supported by Whitehead and presumably Whitehead's supporters for the race. And in the first round of financial disclosures, Jackie Raley has raised over $100,000 for this campaign, and Phil Ballard has raised about $3,000. So they're both running as Republicans. Ballard would look like he's got some ground to make up there. Of course, these are just right now people naming treasurers, which is what they have to do to start raising money. Nobody has actually taken out or returned a petition yet. It is possible that some of these folks we're talking about are going to look at the landscape and maybe decide that it's not a race they want to undertake. We'll just have to see. But it's just a reminder, Scott, that for you and I, who cover all of these things, we kind of never really get a break from election season.
No.
The next election season always starts before the current one is over.
No, we don't. And it's one of those things where because the city has its elections in off-numbered years, there is an election every year. I mean, I think that's actually good. I mean, it's more, if you live in the city, obviously it's more of a routine. I mean, it's every year you've got something. Of course, the drawback is there is never a break if you need one. So yeah, we're going. We're still covering here. Here we are. The city general election is in November, and here we are in September talking about the county races that are next year. So it's a never-ending cycle.
Yeah. And then once we get through the county races next year, we have all of the state legislative races and all those other things. So there's
and the presidential race, which is not local, but obviously, but we vote in it. And then before that's over, we'll be talking about city council races. There'll be a lot of term limited council members who are rotating off, and so there will probably be a big batch of people vying for those positions. So they'll probably start early, just like the county folks are doing now, and so it won't end.
That's right.
We get a breakdown of the new method in the city on that round too.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that sort of remains to be determined.
Yeah. The city can still file a lawsuit.
Right.
I'm curious to see if it changes how
cover.
people campaign, like if it really changes their campaign strategies, because they don't have to go citywide. But we got a year or so to wait.
Yeah. Well, it won't change in the primary, that's for sure. But it could change. It could change the general election if they do that. And what Seth's referring to, is that state law was passed that said basically, if you've got districts, the elections can only be in that district. And city elections, the general elections were all citywide for district seats. So we'll see how that goes. The city could challenge that legally. Don't know if they're going to yet.
They probably either need to challenge it legally or make changes to the city charter
to
be
make
in compliance with the state law.
Yeah, and they have not done that yet. And to change the city charter, they have to do that next year.
Right. It would be in the general. Well, I guess it could be in either the August or November election next year.
Yeah, and there's not been, and city council will have to vote to approve any referendum question on the ballot to change the charter. That's not happened yet. Nobody's talked about doing that. So I know Vice Mayor Andrew Roberto was one who did not, who was talking about the possibility of legal action, and he would when this first happened. They haven't really talked about it. They've got time to do it if they want to do it. And then there's also the possibility of partisan elections as well. So.
Lots more elections from here to the horizon, folks.
That's right. If you live in Knoxville and Knox County, then there is no shortage of civic involvement that you can get into.
One thing I just wanted to hit on quickly, just because I think it's important, and it was a reminder of a situation we're facing, was this sort of crisis we had this week with ambulances being available. And this is something we have talked about before, and this is not only affecting Knoxville, Knox County, it's true across the country. Ambulance services everywhere have been seeing staffing shortages. They've been seeing long lines at hospitals, which themselves have staffing shortages. And so that delays, how quickly ambulances can offload people and then respond to the next call. This has been an ongoing issue, and it kind of reached a little bit of a crisis point this past week.
Yeah, it did. We had one day they even had to activate the emergency response center, which is typically for bad storms or a train derailment or something like that would require multi-agency responses and all, and they had to activate that because of what AMR, the county's contractor, had basically said. Well, long lines at emergency rooms and a spike in 911 calls, and they just couldn't. There weren't enough ambulances on the street to handle it.
It was a bad day.
They brought in I think 4 ambulances from other agencies, and it lasted for 3.5 hours or so. And the reason, one of the reasons is kind of the protocol when ambulances deliver patients to emergency rooms. They have to wait until the emergency room personnel can see and take. You don't want to say take control of the patient, but that's essentially what it is. That become responsible for the care.
The patient has to be in somebody's care.
Has to be in somebody's care, and that transfer is made at the emergency department. And if the emergency department is backed up, then the ambulance has to stay there until they can make that transfer. And so that prevents these ambulances from quickly getting back out onto the road and into the community answering the next call. And there are all kinds of reasons emergency departments are slow now. One of them is staffing shortages. And people, one of the things that people might not understand is you can't take an oncology nurse and put her or him in the emergency department. The emergency department nurses are trained to be emergency department nurses. Oncology nurses are trained to be oncology nurses. And so it's not plug and play. And so there are staffing shortages, and there are people going to the emergency room who don't need to, medically need to go to the emergency room. They're not true emergencies. And this has been an ongoing problem for years and years in the United States, period, especially in states that have not expanded Medicaid or Medicare, Medicaid, excuse me, in like Tennessee, where people get sick and instead of going to see a doctor, they go to an emergency room. That's still happening here, and it's happening in greater numbers. Then you've got people who have mental health issues. Instead of going to a mental health provider, they're going to the emergency room or being taken to the emergency room for care. So all of these factors are kind of came together this week in a I really hate the phrase perfect storm, but it was. And it was brief. It was like 3.5 hours. They're trying to put some protocols in place. AMR is going to be bringing in some ambulances from their sister company to Rural Metro, and Rural Metro fire ambulances are going to be used. They're going to be bringing in ambulances from other locations to Knox County to make sure that they can fully staff the responses. But I mean, they have their own shortages of people. I mean, people are just it's amazing how you've got these professions that are vital, that actually pay well, and there are all these openings for them, and so few people are going into them. And of course, a lot of it's the grueling hours. A lot of it's it's not everybody's cup of tea to be an EMT. And so it's not.
It's pretty stressful work.
It's stressful work, and it takes a unique individual to do it. And so, but all these things are kind of coming together, and and they're all interdependent on one another. You can't just, even with more ambulances on the street, that doesn't do anything about the backups in the emergency departments, and so
Yeah, I mean, well, it's just another sign that our healthcare system is very stressed in Knoxville and Knox County and across the country. I mean, Knoxville and Knox County are actually better off than a lot of places in Tennessee because we have hospitals.
Right.
There's lots of places in Tennessee that don't have easy access to hospitals. But, even for I think that the idea that we have this system that is always ready at any given time, that suddenly you have an emergency, that you're going to be able to get immediate access, that you're going to call an ambulance, that ambulance is going to show up, and you're going to get right into the hospital. Like, that's just not true.
It doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah. And so this was just a reminder of that. The county is in the process of rebidding its ambulance agreement. AMR is certainly expected to bid for that once it is out. And, there's been a lot of discussions about exactly these kinds of issues and how do you put these in a contract in a way that, on the one hand, tries to make sure that that contractor is providing the service that people expect, but that also takes into account what they are all dealing with out there, because you can't put anything in that contract that is just like impossible. Basically,
yeah.
You can't dictate the perfect world because we're not in the perfect world. So there will be more discussion of this to come, but it won't be surprising if we see, another day like this where they have to activate that emergency center and kind of do all hands on deck until they can work through the situation.
Yeah.
I also just really quickly wanted to hit on, we had a story this past week that came out of a discussion at the county finance committee discussion last month, where county chief finance officer Chris Caldwell was giving his regular financial update and reporting on, sales tax numbers and property tax numbers and so forth. And they were all of the numbers were pretty good. They weren't like off the charts good as we have seen in the past couple of years, kind of during and coming out of the pandemic, when there was just this tremendous surge in consumer spending and a surge in sales tax revenues in particular as a result of that. And so we had a couple of years there where both our local and state governments were like exceeding their projected sales tax revenues by double-digit percentages, just huge increases. Right now, we're running more like, 4 or 5% above the budgeted numbers. So that has come down, but we're still like, overall, like things look pretty good. And County Commissioner Larson J. said to Caldwell, for basically the last couple of years, especially because the pandemic made everything so hard for everybody to project economically, like what it was going to mean. And people in finance tend to, especially people making government budgets, tend to project very conservatively to, it's the safe thing to do, obviously. Yeah. And so they were projecting conservatively at the same time that, in fact, the numbers were coming in at just like record levels. And so Jay said, for the last couple of years, we've kind of been hearing like every month or every quarter when we get these reports, it's like, well, it's a lot better than we expected, but it looks like it's going to get worse. And for a while, there was all of this talk about just, it was almost taken for granted a year ago that by this point we would be in a recession. That was not just the projection here locally, it was the projection nationally. There were lots of things kind of pointing to it, particularly having to do with inflation and then the interest rate increases that the Fed was pushing through to try to bring inflation down. Typically, what that leads to is a slowdown in consumer spending, tightening of the belt by companies, even layoffs often. And that has happened to some degree, but really not very much. Yeah. And so the question is kind of like, well, where's the recession? Why are we budgeting over and over again for a downturn that just keeps not showing up?
The sky's still up there. Why has it not fallen?
Right. And Caldwell said, well, yeah, it's a good question. And, a lot of it kind of from conventional modeling doesn't really make sense. And so we talked to Phil Kessler, who's a professor at UT in the Center for Business and Economic Research there at the Boyd Center for Business and Economic Research at the Haslam College of Business
at the University
of Tennessee. It's a very long title. And he said that, yeah, this is what people are seeing across the country. First of all, is just that the economy has held up better than people thought it was going to. And in particular, in Tennessee, it has really held up well. And, he pointed to a couple of factors. Nationally, the workforce you know, a lot of people left the workforce during the pandemic, and there was a supposition that they would come back, and they haven't. And it is starting to look like what the pandemic really did was accelerate a lot of people's retirement plans. You know, people who were maybe thinking, "Oh, I'll work another 5 years." Well, no, I won't. That we've seen an exit from, and especially, you know, we all knew this was coming as baby boomers like yourself, Scott, are approaching retirement age, and that
does that mean I can quit soon?
No,
just kidding.
No, you can't.
I don't want to.
But that we were going to see this exit over a period of time, and that kind of got compressed. Maybe we got 5 or 10 years worth of people leaving the workforce all happening within a couple of years. But the bottom line is, like, a lot of those people are just not coming back. The workforce we have is the workforce we have. And that is why, even in the face of inflation and higher interest rates and whatever, we're not seeing mass layoffs except in a couple of sectors. The tech sector has had some cutbacks. But overall, mostly what we're seeing is still all these help wanted signs. All of these people, whether it's in industries like healthcare that we were just talking about, education, they're having trouble finding teachers. The service sector continues to, you know, and they keep raising wages to try to bring people in, but they're just struggling to have enough staff. And that's one thing that has just kind of, it's keeping the economy. We're not seeing high unemployment rates, the other kinds of things that you see in a real slowdown. And wages are going up as a result of this. And so as wages go up, then people are continuing to spend. And so consumer spending is actually holding up pretty well, even in the face of these high prices, high interest rates. And then in Tennessee, the point that Kessler made is that Tennessee, like the rest of the Southeast, continues to see year over year a lot of in-migration from other parts of the country. And there's graphs you can go out and look at. Every other area of the country, the Northeast, the Midwest, the West, they are all losing population year over year as a whole. And the South is gaining it. People are moving here. They are moving to Tennessee. Tennessee had 80,000, an estimated 80,000 people moved to Tennessee in 2022, estimated to be the highest one-year increase ever. And those people are bringing with them money and resources.
1,000 of them have moved to Choteau this year.
1,000 of them have moved to Choteau.
Really,
Right,
there were more than 1,000
Yeah.
new homes built in Choteau in that area in 2021. It was the fastest growing area of the county.
Yeah, and they are throwing their weight around.
They're throwing it. They're making their voices heard.
But so, you know, Kessler said that all of the economic activity that comes with all of those new people is also continuing to kind of bolster Tennessee's economy in particular. Knox County is among the faster growing counties in the state, and so it is also seeing that. And so basically the takeaway from all of that is just recession, like maybe not. The recession that everybody was sure was going to happen a year ago, now at the national level and at the local level, a lot of people are saying, maybe it's just going to be sort of like more a return to normal. We're not going to have the 20% year over year increases in sales tax revenues that we had for a couple of years there. But the phrase that you're hearing a lot now is soft landing. That's kind of the best guess, is that we're just going to things are going to kind of just keep chugging along at a somewhat lower level. But the prospect of really falling off of that cliff right now is reduced. Of course, things can always happen to change that.
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting is what's happened since the pandemic hit, in that, you know, the pandemic hit and there was this huge upheaval, basically socially. There was a huge upheaval. Obviously, I mean, we parts of the economy shut down, you know, and so there's all this upheaval, personal lives. We associate social upheaval with economic downturns.
Mm-hmm.
When, you know, the Great Recession, we had the housing collapse, and there's, you know, so that was a result of, you know, and it was horrible and long term and everything else. This time, you know, we had the social collapse, but the economy actually overall went better. I mean, you know, obviously there were businesses that closed because of the pandemic and things like that, but others opened or expanded. And there was never the real collapse of the economy that everyone feared at the time. So I think that maybe people are still saying, okay, it's coming.
Right,
it's coming.
Right, because it feels weird.
Because it feels bad.
Like
it seems like it ought to be there, but it's not. And I think that a lot of people feel that since 2020, that we've had the social upheaval, the transition in the workforce is part of that, but all of these things that have happened, and we're waiting for the other shoe to fall, and maybe it's just it's not going to fall. Well, we don't, or at least not now, and not for the reasons we think it's going to.
Yes, Lord knows we are not ourselves economic forecasters.
I don't know about that. I'll weigh in, even though I have no training or knowledge. Right. But no, I mean, it's like I was about to say, the other shoe may drop, but it will probably be, at least in my experience, when you least expect it, where you least expect it, which is one of the reasons that the government budget people are very conservative about things, because they're kind of in the what if business. We want to budget because what if X happens,
right? And it's worse to have too little money than too much money, whether you're the government or anybody else. And so that's how they tend to structure their budgets. They wait till the end of the budget year and they see, oh, we have this surplus. Well, now we're going to go and spend another $5 million on sidewalks or whatever, rather than budgeting that on the front end and hoping it comes through.
Right.
So that is our economic forecast, which I know is one of those things you look to us at Compass for. But we hear a lot of discussion about this because of all of the government meetings we go to and everything, where there's constant talk about it, and so it's interesting to see that shift.
Yeah.
All right, we've been talking for a while, Seth. Let's take a break. We'll come back and do our Q&A. All right, we are to the Q&A portion of the podcast. Every week we go on to the Compass Colloquy, which is our subscriber-only Facebook group, which you can join if you are a subscriber, which you can become by going to CompassKnox.com. And we just ask our readers if there's anything in particular they'd like to hear about on the podcast, apart from the obvious headlines of the week. And we had a question this week from one of our readers referring to the announcement that we talked about the other week from our local state rep, Gloria Johnson, who is running for Senate next year for the seat currently held by Senator Marsha Blackburn. And the question was, do we have other local officials who are thinking about seeking state offices? And the answer is probably. There's nobody else who has declared definitively that they are going to seek state office, but County Mayor Glenn Jacobs has been widely speculated about as a likely gubernatorial contender in 2026, which would be when Bill Lee's second term is up.
The great mentioner has mentioned.
The great mentioner, yes. He has been mentioned. And he has not done anything to dispel the idea that he is going to run for governor. So still a lot of talk around that. No formal announcement from him. And, I don't think you would expect to see one. Well, I mean, I don't honestly know. But the typical thing would be we would get through the 2024 election cycle. And that's when people looking at state races in 2026 would start to get active. And of course, Jacobs himself, his current term expires in 2026. So if he does run for governor, he would be running for governor while serving sort of the latter part of his term, which we've seen before. Bill Haslam was mayor of Knoxville when he ran for governor successfully. And, it's always interesting when that kind of thing happens, because especially as, I'm sure Johnson is already finding as she's making appearances around the state, running for statewide office, it means running statewide. Like you have to be out there, you have to be doing a lot. And so if you're holding office at the same time that you're doing that, I know in the case of Bill Haslam, he was gone a lot from the city county building. And so you have to have good deputies in place to make sure everything continues to run while you are out there doing that. So we may see that with Jacobs. We will see. There are other rumors out there about various people who may seek various state offices. The other kinds of state offices that are most likely for people to move up into our state legislature seats. And so there are people on city council, for example. There could be people on county commission who may be interested in some of the state legislative seats, possibly even in this coming year. One seat that we know will be open is Gloria Johnson's seat in the 90th district, and that is a Democratic-leaning seat. Certainly it's a brand new district, but the only election we've had there so far, Johnson won like 58% of the vote. So one of the two Democratic-leaning legislative seats that we have in Knox County. So that could certainly attract interest from some of our local Democrats.
Yeah, you mentioned that a lot of times that's when local politicians will try to move to state office. It also coincides with this opening coincides with the cycle that several of the council members who live in the 90th district, they're term limited. So they're looking at 2 years from now, that will be the end of their term anyway. So if they run for the legislature next year, they
right, they'd just be giving up the last
year. They'd be giving up the last year of their term. There are several council members who live in the district, who are
Democrats or presumably Democrats.
They're either Democrats or they're really good spies at Democratic function. So obviously on city council they are nonpartisan. At least for now, those races are nonpartisan. But they're Seema Singh lives in that district. Lauren Ryder lives in that district. I'm not positive about Andrew Roberto. I'd have to look that up.
He lives in or close to
that district. So and all three are term limited. They're in their final terms. None of them have come out and said, "Yeah, interested." But those are the types of people who might be interested in running for that seat. I haven't heard of any Republicans who might run for that seat. Johnson won it pretty handily last year, so it's. I'm sure there will be, Republicans who are interested in it. At least one Republican who would be interested in it, but I don't know who that person would be. It is a little. Of course, there will. A lot of it depends on when Johnson steps down.
Right.
If she steps down early, there might be a special election. So it's whether if she steps down before she runs. Of course, she could stay on the ballot if she as an insurance policy if she runs for the Senate. But I don't know.
Yeah, I actually don't know. Can you?
I don't think
state legislature and
Senate.
Well, in any case, I don't think anyone expects that Johnson is going to run for that seat again.
No, and one of the issues there would be as a candidate for federal office, she would be able to serve in the legislature this coming term and raise money for her Senate race. If the state candidates who are in the legislature can't raise money during the session, so if she was on the ballot, even if she could do that, she wouldn't be able to raise money. So why do it? So she won't be on the ballot in the district, so she can raise money for her Senate campaign. Yep. So it will be open, and it will be interesting to see kind of how that plays out, because I think that there could be several Democrats who would be interested in that race, and then what the Republicans will do to challenge it.
Yep. Well, as we said, many more elections to come. All right, let's take a quick look ahead to the coming week. County Commission will hold its monthly work session Monday at 5 o'clock in the main assembly room of the City County Building. They will be talking about items on their agenda for their voting meeting, which is the next Monday. Not a super action-packed agenda. There is an interesting proposal, a resolution by Commissioner Kim Frazier asking the Planning Commission to review and make recommendations on requirements for quote-unquote wireless facilities, which, we're talking about things like cell towers and the kind of the 5G antennas that are being put up around there. It's unclear from the resolution exactly what she wants them to look at. There are definitely people out there who object to those on aesthetic grounds. People don't like them because they are big and clunky and can look kind of ugly. And then, of course, there are also people out there who object to them on other kinds of grounds, like they think that 5G is activating computer chips that have been inserted by the COVID vaccine. I don't think that's what Kim Frazier's concerned about. My guess is that she wants them to look at how to make sure that they are well integrated with local communities and aesthetics and so forth, but probably some discussion of that. And then also we talked about this when we were talking about the Sheriff's Merit System Board a couple weeks ago. There will be an item allowing employees of the Knox County Sheriff's Office to run for office, including sheriff, without having to take a leave of absence. Right now, if you work for the Sheriff's Office and you want to run for political office, you have to take a leave of absence to do it. This would allow them to continue to keep their jobs and their paychecks while running for office. So that will be on there as well. And then Scott, City Council meets on Tuesday.
City Council meets on Tuesday. Very light agenda for compared to recent months. The kind of centerpiece thing there that people might be interested in is you recall the state legislature put a framework in place for police review boards in Tennessee. It was modeled on Knoxville's police advisory and review commission and committee, and it's although there were some changes, and Knoxville that passed, Knoxville would have to make some minor adjustments to its ordinance creating park. And they are going to be making those adjustments on Tuesday. Other than that, there are some other things, some kind of routine contracts. The community schools contract is they're going to give close to $500,000 a year for that, so they're going to be voting on that. But there's nothing that on the surface anyway appears to be earth-shattering. Controversial issues that they're going to be tackling, but sometimes things surprise us, so we'll see.
All right, and then this coming Thursday, you might remember next week we were talking about holding a Compass. Last week. Last week we were talking about holding a Compass happy hour. We had to reschedule that because there was a city council workshop that night that Scott had to go to. And we are going to do that this coming Thursday, the 21st, from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Pirate Bar at the E-Vape Tavern, Seth?
Sure, we can call it that. Like I said, we on the sign currently it says E-Vape Tavern. But we are changing that to the Pirate Tavern because everybody so far has just started referring to us as the Pirate Bar, the Pirate Place, the Tavern. And so we're going to lean into that instead of confusing people with the vape side of it.
Right. You don't have to vape to go there, is what you're saying.
Don't. And you don't have to have an eye patch.
And you do not have to have an eye patch.
We've had a few just wander in, though. It's been pretty fun.
Yeah.
So we will be there just kind of hanging out, happy to meet and greet and chat. From about 5 to 7. And then at 7 o'clock, we are going to do a live taping of this very podcast, including a section for audience Q&A. Which, have we really thought this through that well? We're going to have people come and drink for a couple of hours, and then they're going to ask us questions while we're doing a live taping?
Well, to be fair, we'll be drinking for a couple hours too.
True.
Well,
that brings me back to, have we really thought this through?
We haven't really thought it through. There's that TV program called Drunk History.
Yes,
it's a
big fan of it.
Hilarious thing. So this will be.
Does that mean I have to hire some actors
to be drunk podcasting? So.
Find some actors to play it.
Yes, we'll be doing reenactments.
Yes,
drunk reenactments of school board meetings. Who knows? Anyway, come on out and join us. That's what's the address? 1207 North Central Street, right in the heart of Happy Holler in beautiful North Knoxville. We hope to see you there, and if we don't see you there, you'll at least be able to hear the results of it on next week's podcast, for better or worse, unless it goes south and we just tell Seth to burn the tapes. Okay, we will talk to y'all later.
Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And many thanks to William Wright for composing our theme song. Compass Points is a partnership of Barking Shark Media and Barbarian Productions, and recorded by Lord Seth A. Barber at Barbarian Studios, Knoxville, Tennessee.